All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today I want to spend some time discussing the fact that we're barreling towards another war. And don't worry, guys, this time it'll be an easy war because all the rest have been so easy. But it looks like we're headed towards a potential regime change war in Venezuela against the Maduro regime. Now, this has been something that's been kind of in the works for a couple of years at this point, that the United States has had a policy of maximum pressure against the Maduro regime in Venezuela for quite a long time, and we've really increased that very recently. And now it seems the Trump administration is looking to potentially overthrow the regime and install a US-friendly regime in its place. And I'm going to spend some time today discussing the latest news on this situation and why it's probably harder than they think to overthrow the regime and install just some U.S. democracy friendly country or friendly regime in its place. So, all that and more today on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve System.
Only America first.
End all of these wars. America is trying to play empire. We want everything released, and you're actively covering it up. It's not America first to be pushing our influence in areas where it shouldn't be. We're run by people that don't understand what they're doing and don't understand the ramifications of the policies they're enacting. That's an incredibly dangerous situation. All right, everybody, before we begin the news of the day, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. Also, if you wouldn't mind going over to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and following me over there, I would really appreciate it as well. But yeah, let's get right into the news. So, this news of tensions rising with Venezuela comes just days after the Trump administration released a video that showed a boat leaving Venezuela that they claimed was heading towards the United States, that had 11 people on it that they claimed were allegedly Tren de Aragua members, a cartel that's very prevalent in Mexico, Latin America, South America, one of the biggest cartels that has been involved in trafficking drugs into the United States. So they claim that this boat had 11 members of that gang on it, as well as drugs that, according to the Trump administration, were going to be trafficked into the United States. So as a result of this, they bombed the boat. So the boat gets bombed, they release the video of it, and tensions are now very quickly escalating between the United States and Venezuela specifically. Now, we also have to keep in mind that the United States, the Trump administration, has reclassified in the last couple months a bunch of these cartels in Latin America and South America as terrorist organizations, which basically gives them authorization to bomb them, to conduct military actions against them, because, hey, they're terrorist organizations. We can just bomb them if we want. All these names, basically terrorist organizations, authorization, all these words are very artificial. They don't really mean anything. But in terms of doing this quote-unquote legally, they technically are reclassifying these groups to terrorist organizations to then give the authorization to bomb them in places like Mexico, if they want, and Venezuela, which are two things that we are discussing right now as potential possibilities for the next steps, which who knows where any of this leads, but we're going to get into some of the possibilities here. But before we do that, I do want to discuss where this tension with the Maduro regime in Venezuela came from. For the last couple years, the United States has had a policy of maximum pressure against the Maduro regime. It means things like sanctions, not trading with them, and just ongoing tensions and the constant threat from many people, including Marco Rubio, of regime change and advocating for regime change to install a pro-United States government in its place. Now, this has heightened in the last couple of years because Venezuela and the Maduro regime have kind of become close with the BRICS nations, people like Russia and China. And, of course, that is kind of the opposite world order to the United States, NATO, Western world order. And Venezuela, being very heavy in oil resources, gives the United States some interest in having a government that's friendly to them in its place. So, With this background, we now move into the Trump administration, and with many of the drugs pouring through the southern border and the cartels being based out of Venezuela. And now we have claims from the Trump administration that Nicolas Maduro himself is actually leading Tren de Aragua. He's leading Cartel of the Suns. And these are all very baseless claims that are not baseless, but they don't seem to, there's no real proof of this. And it's funny that they're really going after Maduro here, because most of the drugs that have been pouring into the country haven't been coming from Venezuela. They are coming from places like Colombia and Mexico and China. Venezuela is not the main source of a lot of our drug problems. It just so happens that Venezuela is led by Maduro, which they've had a target on his head for a long time. In fact, there's a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head from the Trump administration. So a lot of this is very convenient. The fact that he's the center of all the drug problems in the United States is very convenient, given that they've wanted to overthrow him for years at this point. And let's just assess what the plan seems to be here, because we have people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth talking real tough and saying that we're about to do some strikes inside of Mexico against the cartels. There's options on the table of potential strikes into Venezuela against the cartels. And where does this lead exactly? Do we have a plan for this? Like, my concern with this is that we don't seem to have a plan for it, because we're talking all tough, like regime change, like we always do with regime change wars, that it's just going to be easy and we're going to install a pro-Western government in there and we're going to gain access to all their oil resources. We're somehow going to stop all the gangs. We're going to go in there unscathed by the gangs and just take over the country without a fight. That seems to be the idea, but that's just not realistic. See, the problem with regime change in Venezuela is, of course, as it is with many South American countries, as it will be with Mexico, is that large parts of the country are kind of run by the gangs. And this creates the problem like what happened in Iraq, like what happens with terrorist groups all across the world in countries that are largely run by terrorists. We get insurgencies, meaning that these gangs will engage in kind of guerrilla warfare tactics against this powerful incoming force that would be the United States. And the United States, thinking that they're just fighting the Maduro regime, wouldn't be prepared for that, seemingly. And now we've deployed about, I believe it was 10 F-35 planes to Puerto Rico. We're deploying some ships to Puerto Rico. And it's seemingly to bait Maduro into starting a war, because now Trump is saying that any plane that gets too close, any Venezuelan plane that gets too close to our military assets will get shot down. And this came after 2 planes did fly very close to our ships and almost got shot down. So it seems like we're strategically trying to bait Maduro into a war here. And I just don't think we're thinking ahead here. I don't think we're thinking where this leads. And of course, the war propaganda is going to just be pouring out as we go. We're going to say that Maduro runs all the gangs. We're going to say that he is the epitome of all evil in the world. And that is, look, the point, and this is part of it. Of course, he's an evil dictator. But you have to realize trying to paint him as the center of all of our drug problems is just nonsense. He's not. The drug problems are the cartels, are other places like Mexico and China. China, which is sending the fentanyl into all these cartels, and then Mexico, which is right on our border, that is run by the cartels. That is the most direct problem that we have right now involving drugs pouring into the country. It's not some boat off the coast of Venezuela that may or may not have involved some cartel members. It's not Maduro, who supposedly runs Tren de Aragua, although there's no proof of that. And this is very similar. I want to just do a callback here to the war in Iraq. This was very similar to the propaganda surrounding Saddam Hussein, where they said that Saddam Hussein was going to hand off the weapons of mass destruction to Al-Qaeda, even though Saddam and Al-Qaeda were not aligned at all. That was the talking point, was that he and Al-Qaeda were aligned and that he was going to give his nukes to Al-Qaeda to then bomb the United States. Number one, the nukes didn't exist, and number two, he wasn't aligned with Al-Qaeda. So this is very similar to what we see coming out of this propaganda with Venezuela. They're saying that Maduro and the gangs are essentially one and the same, and that Maduro is basically the mastermind and the puppet master behind all these cartels and gangs, without really any proof, because that's just kind of an easy sell to the American people. When the reality is they've wanted to overthrow Maduro for years, and this has been the policy of the Trump administration now this entire time. And people like Marco Rubio, you can go back, he's been talking about this for years. It's not that he just so happens to be involved in all this drug smuggling. It's not really the case, because most of the drugs aren't even coming from Venezuela. It just happens that some are, and that is enough for them to try and paint Maduro and the cartels as the same, because that's just easy enough to link together that the American people, they think, will buy it and throw public support behind a potential regime change war. And as I said earlier, I don't think this will be easy. I think they're very much underestimating the possibility of insurgencies, the possibility that once there's a power vacuum, it may just be filled by the gangs that are already very prevalent in the country. And let's just, to end off here, take a step back and assess if this ends up happening, if this ends up becoming the policy and we are involved in a regime change effort in Venezuela. What does this mean for everything else in the world? Let's just take a look around, a very brief look around. Right now, we have the seemingly never-ending war in Russia and Ukraine that, for some reason, we continue to fund, even though neither side is seemingly wanting to have peace. Besides us, we continue to send all of our money and all of our weapons over there for no reason other than to escalate, seemingly. Russia just last night, before recording this, they had their biggest airstrike campaign of the entire war, hundreds and hundreds of strikes inside of Ukraine. No signs of slowing down in that war, and we still are funding the entire thing. France, just so we all know the state of that war, France just told all their hospitals to be ready for war in 6 months. So Europe knows something we don't here, and this war doesn't seem to be stopping. Okay, let's leave that one aside. The Middle East is an entire war zone. The entire Middle East is a war zone. We have Israel and Gaza. Israel is finishing off their genocide of the Palestinians right now by bombing every last building in the country, and are going to proceed with the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people into the surrounding countries, which will create a refugee crisis into Europe, which is already disastrous. Right now, there's also the nonstop bombing of Somalia, which is also going to create refugees. Right now, we're also trying to hold back a war between Ethiopia and Egypt, which would be a crisis. There's also the potential of us going back into Iran to finish off bombing their nuclear sites, which haven't been destroyed. Also, we are in a stare down right now with China over Taiwan, and that could very well in the next couple of years explode into an all-out war, because China could take Taiwan, and the United States, for some reason, is obligated to just jump in and play policeman and say, no, you can't do that, China. It's just this empire mindset that we think we can control what everyone in the world does has gotten us into this mess where now, on every front, the United States is deeply implicated in all these wars. And now you're telling me with all this, with the current landscape the way it is, we're going to launch a regime change effort against Maduro under the pretext that it's going to be just easy? How have these other wars gone? They haven't gone very good. They aren't very easy. Why are we trying to start another one so quickly? Why is the anti-war president so tickled by the possibility of another war? Like, this is just disastrous all around. I don't like where any of this is going, and I'm just saying, you heard it here first. If this goes down, mark my words, I don't think they understand how difficult it's going to be. Because for all the talk about the gangs, they don't seem to be considering that if we actually invaded the country, that the gangs are there and will engage in some sort of fighting back. So, all of this is just ridiculous, and it's just piling on at this point. I thought we were going to get an end to the wars. We were promised day one. We were promised that we were going to be working towards peace, and now it seems like all these wars are just exploding, and they're all in the worst shape that they've been. So, anyways, I think that's where I'll leave it off for today. That's my analysis of this situation. Be sure to stay tuned. Be sure to like and subscribe here to stay tuned on all of the latest on this and every other conflict in the world. And also, if you wouldn't mind going over to my Instagram, Spotify, and X and following all my accounts over there, I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve System.
Only America first.